Karlie.
Hey, it's Shamina. And we're emotional. So today we are going to be
okay, done.
That was annoying. I was like, are you doing that intentionally? Today we're going to be talking about language and the importance behind language.
And how we use it in our everyday life. Like, do you notice that you use certain languages? We're going to talk about it.
Let's get emotionful, everybody. Are you ready?
Yeah, let's do it. Okay. So I feel like this topic got brought up because of my TikTok addiction. Well, kind of. But it really got me thinking that there are some words out there that society has just such a negative connotation with it that when people use it or say it, it's almost like your brain switches, and the moment you hear that word, you think that like whole sentence is going to be like a negative thing. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So, okay, for instance, how I got interested in like, oh, let's talk about this is because I've told Shamina this a million freaking times, but there was this TikTok video that I saw about this girl saying how when she was younger, she would always, not always, but like she would start something, and if she didn't want to do it anymore, she would just quit. And her mom would always kind of allow her to, and not promote it, but would never be like, no, you can't do that. And her dad was kind of, she said her dad was kind of hesitant on it, but she was saying as she got older, it was such a good thing that she experienced that younger, because when she was at a really bad job, she was able to quit and she didn't have any guilt or anything with it. And when she was in a toxic relationship, she was able to just quit the relationship and leave. And it wasn't like, oh my God, I need to try harder, because I feel like that's what people always think of when you quit is like, well, did you try? And it's like, yeah, but also I think sometimes you just know in your heart, and you shouldn't have to put all of yourself into something for you to finally be like, I can't do it. Like you shouldn't drain your entire being before you're at that point that you're okay to quit. And I feel like a lot of people get to that point because you don't ever want to say that you quit something, because then people are like, oh, you quit, you don't try, you didn't, do this or do that. And I think it's really resonated with me a lot lately, just because of what I've been going through and what I'm learning now, that I'm starting to, like, when 2021 came around, I was like, I'm doing what makes me happy. I quit my job. I quit my relationship. I, started making and it's almost like I'm starting entirely fresh, and I'm creating these boundaries now for myself to, put myself first, because I think for the longest I was staying at a job because it was financially stable. And it was just like, okay, but I'm literally miserable every day that I wake up and I have to go to this job. And I'm literally out loud being like, today's going to be a good day. And I would have to repeat that to myself several times throughout the day because I hated this job so much. And then, like, with my relationship, looking back, I have a journal entry from like 2016, 2017. Literally all of my feelings that I had at the end it was the same, but I stayed for 3 more years, and I literally drained my entire being until I was like, I cannot do this anymore. And I just think that we need to be more okay with the word quit for me, but there's other words out there. So I just think that that's where this episode kind of began, and then me and Shamina kind of, so you go, Shamina.
Save me, I'm drowning here. So I think Karlie, so we've obviously been talking about this and kind of the importance of language, or how we as a society kind of perceive, certain words like quit or failure or, even from like the mental health, like vulnerability or emotions, like those are seen as weakness. Yeah. And so there's a lot of power behind language. And so we really just kind of wanted to talk about that and like normalize, like, you can quit something and that's not necessarily bad, or like you can fail and that's, you know, the biggest precipice
beginning of the best day of your life, you know? Or like another thing I was talking to my mom about is like, it's not bad to have positive language, first off. Like, obviously, ideally, we want to live in a field with butterflies and wildflowers and nothing ever happens. But I think that if there ever is a day that you have a bad day, it's okay to say you had a bad day. Like, some days it's really, really hard to find that good in that day. Don't get me wrong. Like, I think the goal is we should look for that good. But some days, you know, you're just having a really bad day. And I think that it's okay to acknowledge that because then you can grow from that.
Well, I think it helps to normalize like these words. They don't have to be good or bad. It can just be neutral. And depending on the context, depends on like the meaning behind the word. So if I was like, yo, like I just had a rough day today, like I had a bad day. And so for me, that may mean like I didn't work out today, or I had a really tough day with clients. That doesn't necessarily mean like, oh my God, I had this bad day. Everything's ruined. My whole life is falling apart. And, you know, like everything's blowing up, things around me. My meaning behind, you know, the word bad may mean very differently than if Karlie tells me that like, oh, I had a bad day kind of thing. And so I think it's more so like the importance of neutralizing the language instead of putting it in this category of it has to be this. That's what it means. You know, we live in a very all or nothing, black and white type of culture. And so we want conceptualization. We want this to fit in a category. We want this to make sense. And for a lot of things, it doesn't. And so being able to like break out of this traditional like one or the other type of mentality, you know, I think we're doing that in like all aspects of our culture. You know, they're from a religious standpoint, from a sexual orientation, gender identity standpoint, like we're seeing all of these. It's no longer one or the other. It's more of a spectrum. And I think even with our language, that also means something, and the importance behind the types of words that we choose. So just recently, actually, I'm sitting in on a trauma group that my supervisor is doing, and she's like, yeah, you can sit on that. I'm like, cool, I definitely want to do that. So it's a trauma group about healing trauma through the chakras. And I'm super into, you know, like chakras, energy, and healing ever since like the intuitive reading. And if you haven't heard that episode, go check it out because it's very interesting. So I was like, oh, we can mix like trauma healing and chakras together. Like, count me in. Super cool. So just last week, actually, we were talking about the throat chakra, which is about speaking your truth and being able to kind of own your truth. And we did this activity where we did I am statements as a group. So my supervisor had a Word document up and we were all kind of contributing like, what is one I am statement to this group? So one of mine was, I'm allowed to experience strong emotions. And another one was, I am worthy even if I ask for help. And so each of us in the group took turns, and then we went again and we each kind of took turns. And then I ended up reading the whole document aloud just to be able to see like what that would feel like for me, or what experience or emotions would come up. And it was actually very, very interesting because I know, obviously I was present during the time. So like, I know what statement matched to what person, but it was very interesting to read it because my statements that I said, I had a much stronger emotional response when I was reading them again than somebody else's statement, because those weren't my words. I may have identified with what they had said. I know somebody else in the group had mentioned like something like, I am enough. And that's something that I've always, you know, that concept of like, I am enough for whatever has always been something very prevalent in my life. And so I was like, yeah, you know, I connect with that, but it wasn't my statement. And so even when I read it, I was like, yeah, I connect with this, but this doesn't belong to me because those weren't the words that I chose or I used. And I thought it was super interesting how, hang on, sorry. I have little kitties rolling around. Can you say hi? Hello.
Right. Put the dang kitty down.
Who doesn't like a kitten? Come on. He's adorable. And he's purry. Aw. The other one's like judging me in the window, like, what are you doing? Anyway, so I thought that exercise was super impactful for me, because I saw exactly kind of what Karlie was like talking about with the importance of language and how we connect to that, because I could see, I obviously have no idea what other people's trauma was like, but the words that I chose were based off of the trauma that I had experienced, and the lessons that I've had to learn along the way. And I know that other people were doing the same thing. And so it was very interesting just to kind of see all of our statements were very similar in one way or another, but they meant so much more to each individual person. And so, it's almost like we, as cliche as it sounds, like we tell a story using the type of language that we do. And it develops as part of our personality, as part of our persona, the way that we speak, the way that we portray ourselves, the way that we even conceptualize our own lives is based on the language that we use or we have heard growing up. So, if you grow up in a household where, and I hear this all the time with my clients, like this perfectionistic mindset, like you have to get straight A's, you have to do all these extracurriculars, you have to do this, you have to do that, you have to be above and beyond in order to be successful. And that's kind of the language that's used in the household. And so as we grow up and develop as an adult, we develop more of like this perfectionistic high expectation mindset. And so we tell ourselves like, I'm not good enough unless I'm doing X, Y, or Z, or I need to do more because I'm not meeting my expectations. And so, even our development as children forms our language and how we speak to ourselves.
Well, so a couple things. I definitely agree with you on like having more of a spectrum than like a black or white, because like you said, like kind of to neutralize it in the sense of like, if you have a bad day, it doesn't mean like all hell broke loose. It just may mean like, you know what, today I just wasn't feeling it, but nothing really crazy happened. And then another thing, well, two things. One that just hit me of like, I notice that even sometimes with my behavior, like for me, and I think it only really has happened like as I've gotten older, and I want to say that it's from like my past relationship, but I feel like if I'm not like doing something, I'm not being productive. And I feel that way because I feel like with him, he was always like waking up at 7 a.m. and going on a run and going out. And he was like, oh, and I was just like, we had totally different personalities in that sense, but it kind of like made me feel like if I wanted to stay home or something, it was like not like, what are you doing? And it's just like, well, I don't like to wake up at 7 a.m. and go on 5-hour runs. But then the other thing I was thinking, also with language is like one word that comes to me all of the time that I think it really hit me of like, I don't like this word. And I know I've talked about it in a prior episode, was when I was in school for becoming a social worker, is normal. And I know that I still use it sometimes, but I don't like that word. And I don't like that word because your normal is not my normal, it's not their normal. And so I just feel like it's like a very judgy word in certain contexts, obviously. But like, if you were just be like, well, that's not normal, bitch. Yeah, it is. Like, for me, it is normal, So like, I know that's a word that I try to use like average or something. I try to use a different word that I can replace with it, because I just feel like everyone's normal is so different. And who am I to judge you that your normal is not my normal? And it's just, Shamina, she's distracting me.
They're on all around my laptop. I'm fostering these kittens, and there were 4. Now there's 2. I'm working on it. Give me credit for my progress.
I know. But anyway, so I try not to use the word normal, because to me it really hits a note in the sense of like, and I think it's an important word for me personally in trying to find better words, because I don't ever want someone to feel like what they do is not acceptable or something to someone else, if that makes sense. Like, and I feel like I've really opened my eyes to that more because when I was younger, I traveled a lot. I mean, I would like to travel again soon, hopefully in the future, but I went to Ecuador, I've been to Poland. And so like just seeing like these different cultures, it really opens your makes you open-minded. And it's just like, whoa, like, I feel like you're just like, okay, and so I'm just like, I don't know what normal is. I don't know.
Well,
I know what mine is.
right. And I think, you bring up a really good point, particularly with like obviously the word normal, but more so with our language is that we do assign a stigma to it or some type of like negative connotation. And so, I think it brings up the concept of being mindful about the words that we choose when we speak. And I think being a therapist, that's really helped me because I have to be very like calculated in how I say it and what I say. If somebody's like, yo, like I'm having a really bad day, I can't just be like, suck it up, get over it, you're gonna be fine. I mean, I probably could, but I wouldn't have a lot of clients coming back and seeing me.
Yeah.
But it's also kind of pushed me to grow and develop more of like this vocabulary, or also just kind of normalizing, because my clients have a lot of negative self-talk or like negative vocabulary or assigning negative something meaning to these words. And so, from the outside perspective, I get to be able to be more of an objective party and saying like, well, what's wrong with that? Like, or what if you don't meet those expectations? Like, what's going to happen? And kind of like challenging that thought process a little bit. And it's really interesting to kind of see the wheels turn as they start to consider different meanings for the narrative that they've been telling themselves all of their lives. And
when you were talking, you made me think of like, have you heard like the toxic positivity?
Like the
I
word,
can't,
what it means.
like what it means, like good vibes only. And like, I feel like that really hit home with me when I went through the breakup and everything, because it was like, no, not good vibes only. Like, and like another phrase that really sits with me is like the fake it till you make it, or because it's like, why though? Like, and I think that goes back to like at least I'm going to talk specifically for the US and I'm generalizing, but like, you always have to be happy, like the whole fake it. Like, why do I have to fake it? Like, why can't I let it be known that I'm sad right now or that I'm grieving? But you can't do that because then people don't know how to act, and they're like, ooh, like, oh, she's not happy, I don't know what to do with her. And so they just come up with this like good vibes only or fake it till you make it. And I know like I don't think I've ever been that person, but especially during this time, I've realized I'm choosing not to be that person. And I am consciously choosing to allow myself to feel these emotions. And I think that really is hard for me, not the allowing myself to feel the emotions, but all of like that toxic positivity that comes with society, because sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, why am I still like maybe sad or grieving it? And it's been this long. But then in my head, I'm like, this relationship was over 5 years. It's only been 2.5 months. Like, yeah, I'm still going to have days where I'm sad. And so I just have to remind myself of that, because I just feel like, especially like social media and stuff, but it's all consumed with like good vibes only or fake it till you make it, or you don't need him, and once you leave you'll feel so much better, and you just have to push yourself. And it's like, I don't think people there are people, but the amount of energy it does take to push yourself, sometimes you don't have that energy, and you have to allow yourself to just freaking rest, man. So that's my rant.
Sometimes the language that we use almost like invalidates our emotional experience, or just because you may not use that language doesn't mean that I can't, because the meaning behind it is something different to me. And so I think it's more about like being able to kind of educate, if like you're like, oh yeah, I had a bad day, I'm like, okay, and And somebody else may be like, no, like, what are the positives that had, in your day? Like, there had to be something really positive. And like, yeah, maybe there were things that were positive, but overall, like, I would consider this day bad.
Yeah.
But kind of going back to like the generalization, I think, we have like that toxic positivity because it's almost like we don't want to deal with other people's negative emotions. And so
Well, because we don't know how to deal with our own. Most people don't even know how to deal with their own.
So it's like, I need you to like be put together and put on a really brave face and make sure that everything's fine and dandy, because I don't know how to deal with you if you're not. Or even on social media, how many people do you see posting, I just lost my job, or I don't have enough money to pay rent this month, or I'm going to be homeless because the housing market fucking sucks right now because of the pandemic and I can't fucking find a place to live. Like, we don't post about that shit. It's, I'm getting married, I'm getting engaged, I got this new car, I'm having a baby, I got a new pet, I got all of this.
Well, and another thing to just add to that and then to let you continue is I feel like some people don't post those because no one will validate them on social media. People will be like, okay, go find another job, or okay, like, it's, I think on like social media, it's who has it worse or something like that. And it's just like, that's not what we're doing, bro. Like, okay, and I think I saw something recently that was like, just because you struggled doesn't mean other people should. And if that's what you're wanting, like, why? Like, I feel like for me, I can only speak for myself. I feel like I initially wanted to start this podcast almost in a sense, like, one, to help me heal, but two, like, to help other people if they're in a situation. Like, girl, get out, don't stay until you have mentally, physically, emotionally drained your entire being. Like, I feel like it's like, if I struggled and I can help someone else potentially not struggle as much as I did by telling my story, that's what I want to do. So
definitely. And I think if we look at like from like a historical place, I've been watching Downton Abbey lately, so but like throughout the generations, it's been emphasized within like a family dynamic or unit that anything negative that happens stays within the family. You don't go outside of the family. You don't talk about things that are happening. You could have just like miscarried a baby at, like, back in the day in like the 1800s, and you have to be prim and proper and put together, and like everything is fine and everything's okay.
And that's still almost a thing today, specifically for miscarriages. And it's sad because a lot of women do experience it. And I don't think we realize in general how many women do experience it because people don't talk about it. And I get some people don't talk about certain things because it's hard to, because I've definitely felt that. But I think sometimes if you push yourself through that hurt to talk about it, it gets easier. And, that's not everyone's cup of tea. But I know for me, sometimes I would force myself to talk about what I went through. I would cry, me, but I would cry to talk about it, but it almost made it easier the next time I told that story to, my goal is eventually I can say it without shedding a tear. And like me and you were talking the other day of like, soon these memories won't have these feelings behind it or these emotions because I'm allowing myself to feel them now, so that in a year or whenever I say the same memory, it'll just be a memory.
Right. And so even, our emotional response also changes with the language that we use. If you talk about a breakup and you're like, I was devastated and I was betrayed, and we use these very strong, like, emotional words, that has a different type of feel and meaning to it. Whereas if you're like, yeah, I got hurt in my past relationship and it totally sucked, and I'm trying to heal from that and move forward, those two things have completely different meanings behind them. And the message that we're also trying to portray changes based off of like the words that we choose as well. And so, I think we live in a society where we're supposed to be happy all the time. We're supposed to show people that we're happy. We're very uncomfortable with any like public display. I don't know what's happening with my hair, but it's very frustrating today. Very like public displays of emotion, or, you know, like what's happening, what's going on. Even like as a therapist, I've been in like staff meetings with other therapists. And I remember one specifically, I was in, I had a really, really difficult like intake that I did. It was extremely like scary for me. With the client, and it was a big thing, but I had like a very strong emotional reaction. It was almost like traumatizing for me. And I remember we were discussing it in the staff meeting, and I started crying, and my first thought was, oh my God, why are you crying in front of a group of people? And then it was like, oh my God, these are all therapists, you should be able to cry. And then it was, oh my God, why are you crying again? Like, this is uncomfortable, you need to stop this. And then it was like, it's okay, like you can cry, there's nothing wrong with that. And then afterwards, you know, I had people like, hey, like, are you good? Do you need a process? Like afterwards, you know, can we check in with you? Anything like that. And it was very supportive. But I've also had times where, you know, there's like this public display of affection and you're ashamed for it, or you get in trouble for it. And we don't
or you're made fun of.
Yeah, or you get made fun of for it. And we don't know how to deal with emotions in a healthy way. We just want to shut that shit down and choose, like, tell me the happy stuff. Or even if you have like a friend who like vents to you, we always try to like silver line it. Well, and we'll say things like, well, at least this is happening, or, but you have this going for you. Or, you know, even with you, like, you don't like your job, and something, you know, I could tell you like, at least you're making money right now. Like, shut up, you know?
Well, it's funny because that's how it was with my past job of like, I remember talking to my brother, like telling him I wanted to quit. And he was like, yeah, but you're consistently getting paid and you have health insurance. And like, I can still remember that conversation. Because of that conversation, I think I stayed like another 3-ish months. And I wish I wouldn't have. Like, looking back, I don't care. I'll find a way. You know, like, I just feel like at the end of the day, like, this is something that I'm like starting to realize is everything's going to be okay. And if it's not the end. You know, like, I'll figure out a way and it'll work itself out. And for me, that's, you know, but I just know, like, again, with the past job, I remember telling people that I was not happy and I hated it. And they're like, yeah, but you're consistently getting paid and you have a paycheck every 2 weeks. And I'm like, okay, like, ooh, so I'll just struggle mentally for the rest of my life. Like,
and again, like, going back to the language, if that's the language that we tell ourselves, then we settle for being unhappy and unfulfilled in our jobs. Then we're not pushing ourselves to achieve more or being able to feel fulfilled in what we're doing, because we have this mentality of, but at least I'm getting paid, or, but I have a roof over my head, I have benefits, I'm able to provide for my family, which are all very valid and important things. And we don't want to take away from that at all. And that's a very valid reason to stay with a job. Like, if you can't, if you don't have the means to quit, or, you know, to take a lapse in employment or what have you, like, there are a lot of people who can't, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But it's recognizing the validity and the truth behind it, because you may not like your job and feel very unfulfilled, and being able to communicate that and saying, like, listen, like, I'm really unfulfilled. I know that I'm getting paid, and that's the only reason that I'm staying at this job right now. And that's very authentic and congruent to who we are and what we're doing. And that's what I was going to say earlier, is kind of like with the societal stuff going on, it almost creates this distance between what we need to portray to other people and how we're actually feeling internally. And the more that we use language that is socially acceptable, or what society wants to hear and what our peers want to hear, the more distance we grow from our authentic self and who we actually are. And you know, there was like, Karlie and I, obviously we talk all the time, but we talk about these things, and her and I can be very authentic with ourselves and saying, you know, there was one day that I had called her and I was like, I am having a panic attack right now. Like, I'm crying. I don't know what's happening. Like, please help me. And she was able to like walk me down and, you know, kind of go through the motions of like helping to ground me or what have you. But I could have called and be like, hey, like, I'm having a bad day. And then on the inside, oh my God, I'm freaking out and you have no idea, but I can't tell you that because that's uncomfortable and we don't talk about those things in our relationship. Like, that could have been.
But I did that same thing to you.
Right.
I would do that to you all the time. I would call you and I'd be like, I don't like how I'm feeling. Just make it go away. Like, I was just like, oh, like, I'm just so sad and I just don't like feeling sad. So, but not to cut you off, but you totally make a point, because I think the reason why it hit me so hard and I was like, I have to fucking quit, is because those were other people's mentalities of like, well, it's a consistent, and it wasn't mine.
Right.
Like, mine was, I don't care. Mine was, I'm unhappy and no money. There's not enough money in the world that will make me continue to do something that I'm so unhappy with. Well, we'll talk about that later, but
generally speaking.
But, and so it just got to a point, like, again, I think I've said it, that it was after New Year. Well, it was like New Year's Eve of 2020, New Year's Eve of 2020, that I was like, I cannot go back there. And I remember just like breaking down crying to my mom, because like thinking about having to go back to work, I was just like, I can't stand another day in this office. And so I pulled the plug. And I think that's another thing. It's not really language particularly, but taking risks is, I don't know if you can hear my dog, but taking risks is a really scary thing, I think, because society makes you like, ooh, do you really want to take that risk? Like, you're stable right now. And like, I was like, hell yeah, I want to take that risk. But, like, not everyone is okay, because like you said, and they're all valid points of like, I have a family to feed, or I have a mortgage to pay. But sometimes, and this is what I truly believe, is like, when you take a risk, something better will come. I don't know when. And so obviously that's the scary thing. But I think when you are staying true to who you are, good things come.
Mm-hmm. And I want to go back to what you had said of, you made the decision to quit your job because all of the reasons that you stayed were other people's rationale and not yours, of like, yeah, I want to stay because of X, Y, or Z. And I think that's a really, really important thing. Because I mean, think of it like from a developmental perspective. When we're young, we adopt whoever is taking care of us, their language of what we should be doing, how we should think, how we should behave, how we feel our emotions. So in our formative developmental years, we are holding on to what other people tell us to do or to say or to think or how to behave. And then as we get older, I think that's where a lot of the transitional issues tend to happen with like young adults, because we're trying to break away from our family of origin or whoever raised us, their mindset and their mentality, and being able to be an individual and thinking, does this actually fit for me or not? Do I actually believe in this, or is this something that my family has taught me to believe? Does this feel congruent to who I am now and what I want to do and my values in my life? Or is this my parents' values and what they're trying to push onto me? And I see that a lot from a clinical perspective, like with my clients, because I work with the young adult population. So it's like they're going to college, they're doing all of these things, being able to find their own identity. And there's a lot of turmoil that happens, because it's like, I don't believe what my family has told me that I need to believe all of my life. What the fuck do I do now? And it's terrifying.
And I don't think that there's anything, so 100% agree with you. And I think that for me, if I ever am a parent, whether that's adopting, biological, I don't freaking know. But and I think this is why I also know I'm not ready to be a parent, is because I want to be able to raise my child, giving them the opportunity to kind of build their own self-awareness and their own values and all of that. And when you do that with a young child, that is very, very hard, because you so quickly want to just correct them when they're wrong, instead of allowing them to go through it, realize it's wrong, and problem solve, or instead of just correcting them, asking them questions. And I know that I'm not the most patient person. So I know I would probably be like, bro, just grab the spoon, like eat the soup with a spoon. So that's how I know, like, I don't want to do that as a parent though. But I also want to acknowledge that, like, for the most part, I think most parents try to do the best that they can do. And I wanted to mention, when you first said it, something that I find really interesting that maybe can be another episode is how you can have siblings, and how, and obviously for the most part the same parents raise you, obviously that depends. Okay, I'm going to restate that. For siblings that you have that are in a household where the same parents raised you, how different you can be. Because I have two brothers, and I believe that I'm very different from both of them. I mean, we both have similar qualities, and there are certain things that we do have the same, but there are certain things that it was like, who raised you? But we were literally raised by the same individuals our entire life. So I think, like you said, like that transitional of you trying to find yourself. Some people go to the extremes of whatever that is, and you're whatever. But I personally feel like, for me, I think all my life my parents were very I don't know, like, allowed me to experience it for the most part and make decisions sometimes, but um it's that's a whole nother episode, because I could go on about how interesting that is. But language, yeah, like how you're raised, the experiences that you've gone through, all determine the language you use. And it's constantly evolving, like I feel like, for me, the word normal was never a big deal until I went to school for social work, and I was starting to be taught about all these things that, like, normal can almost be like a negative. And I was like, oh my gosh, or like whatever, or, especially me now, after I experienced the breakup, now I am trying to be better of using, I don't even want to say quote unquote, using words that people see as not the best, like quit and stuff. I want to be better at using that and being like, embracing it and being like, yeah, I quit. So what you gonna do?
Or even
But
like
yeah.
the word selfish, like that's supposed to be like this
Oh
horrible.
yeah.
I just had a conversation with a client who, is a mom and trying to find like her own identity. I was like, you can be selfish, and that's not a bad thing. And sometimes we need to be selfish because we are so selfless. And she was
I was
like,
gonna say, in a society that you're supposed to give and give and give and help everyone else, and it's like, okay, well, who's gonna help me?
right. She was
Because
like, it was like super validating. And it was just like a simple, you can be selfish. And she really connected to that. And that was really cool to see. But the there's also, as you were talking, Karlie, something else, like the language that we grow up in is also language that's not spoken. So like in my family, for instance, we went through the 10 years of domestic violence, and nobody in my family ever said, you're not allowed to talk about what's going on in this house to other people. You're not allowed to ask for help. You're not allowed to communicate to other family members what's happening. It, excuse me.
sorry. You just like choked, and I know I probably shouldn't have laughed. Are you okay? That's the right response.
That was mean. There is no right or wrong response. It was that a
Thank you, Shamina.
Anyways, so nobody explicitly told me those things, but I have developed this language that I'm not allowed to talk about this. This is a secret. I need to not communicate this to other people. And that's exactly what happened. And so there's also a lot of unspoken language that we kind of develop based off of our experiences, or this is sort of off topic, but not like we in the therapy realm, we call it like core beliefs. So those are like thoughts that we have to our core and develop as we develop throughout our years. And a lot of them that I see in therapy, there's usually like 3 that it all boils down to is, I'm not worthy. I don't deserve this. I don't deserve, or I'm not worthy of love. So usually like those 3 things tend to be like people's core beliefs. And so nobody's, more times often than not, nobody's ever told my clients like, you're not worthy, you don't deserve this, you can't be loved in the way that you want to be. But those are the messages that we receive throughout our lives, whether it's through somebody else's behavior, whether it's the way that they portray themselves towards us. And so we also kind of develop this internal dialogue and this internal language based off of how we see the world and how we interpret it. And so, you know, you can take two, and this kind of ties back to like the sibling thing, like you take two siblings who go through similar experiences and they have completely different thought processes and mindsets and language that they use to describe, you know, what they went through. Even like me and my brother, you know, we went through the domestic violence together. His story is different than mine, and he's going to describe it a lot differently than I will, and my emotions about it are going to be different than his. And side note, I do think that's a super good episode, so let's put that on the calendar to discuss. But
and well, also you made me think about something too, is I feel like because in general most people struggle to express any emotions that's not happy and like good, I feel like when you do have those emotions, you tend to project. So you tend to, when you have these negative emotions, you tend to project. And then like me and you were again talking about this the other day, how anger is a secondary emotion. And again, it was a video I saw on TikTok, but it was about this girl who, she was like 4 months post breakup, and how in her therapy, she was saying how she was still struggling with moving on. And, you know, all of her friends and stuff were telling her like, you know, channel that anger into working out or a new hobby. And she was just like, I don't have anger. And how her therapist said, you don't have anger because you're experiencing your raw emotions of sadness, despair, grief, and anger is that secondary emotion. And I think that when you're not taught how to express those emotions, which most times people aren't, because you're learning from someone who doesn't know how, that then when you do have these sad emotions, you don't know what to do, you project and you're like, well, I don't even like you. And it's not really that that's it. It's just you are feeling something that you don't know what the heck to do with yourself. And so you're pushing it. And I thought that was interesting because I felt it was interesting because I kind of resonate, because I don't think that I personally feel anger, and I do feel the sadness. And like for me, when I feel sadness, I don't project onto anyone. I just like curl up in a ball and I'm just like, I'm sad, you know? And like when you're in that, it is hard to get that motivation and channel that energy, because it's like, I don't have that energy. I don't have this anger. I have this sadness.
And we don't know how to differentiate between emotions. So for a lot of people, and I've done this a lot when I was working with kids, feeling mad and feeling sad, I would have them draw like what does it look like when you feel mad? What does it look like when you feel sad? 9 times out of 10, they draw the same thing for both, because they don't even know how to differentiate the difference. And you know what you were describing is basically like adolescence, you know, like we have all of these really strong emotions, or like we get rejected and then our first response is like, I didn't even like you anyway, like I don't care or whatever. But we can't say, wow, I feel really embarrassed, or I'm feeling really rejected right now and that's hurting my feelings. If I ever heard like a teenager say that to me, I'd be like, damn, like you have a very high emotional intelligence. Thank you, that is wonderful. But we
are done here.
Yes, my work is done. Thank you. See you next week. But we don't do that because we don't know how. And usually, you know, obviously we learn, it's a generational pattern, and we're not taught these types of things. I wasn't taught until I went to therapy and I went to graduate school. Otherwise, game on. Like, let's see how this it is really important because we have all of these different types of emotions. And that's something I really emphasize with my clients is, how can you verbalize your emotions if you can't even identify them like within yourself? And so I'll give them like this feelings wheel. It's literally just a list of feelings words.
Bro, I would just like our listeners to know how many feelings are on this feelings wheel, because Shamina will post it, because it's just, no wonder we don't know how to, like, there are so many.
Yeah, I remember, I think it was my first day of graduate school. I walked in to, it was like foundations of mental health counseling class. And my professor handed us this fat ass packet of words and said, you need to
Fat
learn
ass.
because it was a thick with 2 C's. It was a list of emotion words, like from A to Z. And they were like, you need to learn these words because your clients don't have this vocabulary. And so you're going to have to learn how to teach them to that. And I thought, holy shit, like that is so profound. And every single session that I've ever done with a client, that is usually one session that we talk about is the language about how do you communicate your emotions? How do you even conceptualize your emotions? How do you think about them? And how can you communicate it to other people? Because we aren't taught this language. You know, we're taught how to spell apple and what apple means and cat, but we're not taught about sad or rejection or, you know, like we're the fucking emotional spelling words, people.
Well, and it's funny because my last therapy session, I had brought up how I had been feeling or how I had been like having these random memories, like most random memories of me and my ex, like going to the freaking mall, walking around the mall, just the most random things. And she was just like, are you feeling lonely? And I was like, yeah, I do get lonely. And she was like, you're seeking companionship. She's like, you're having these memories because it's that companionship that you're thinking about. And she's like, but you have to remind yourself that these memories aren't real. Like, yeah, the physical memory is real, but she's like, these feelings that you're attaching with it, she's like, those aren't real. But it was just interesting that when I was telling her that she immediately was like, are you feeling lonely? And I was like, honestly, like, I feel like right now where I'm at in the breakup, that's probably the biggest thing that I'm experiencing is the loneliness, because in general, I'm just a person that likes to be not around a lot of people, but you know, at least like one person. I like that. And you know, for a little while I'm not. And so I was just like, yeah, man.
And that
Yeah, preach.
nice way to like, you gave her the information and she was able to like slip in like, here's the word that you're looking for, but you don't know how to identify yet now. And then you just hear that word and everything fucking clicks for you. And
Yeah.
that's the power of language, or the power of our emotional language. Because, and that's like the really beautiful thing about therapy is, you know, my clients will say something and I'll give like an empathic response with like the emotion attached to it. And they're like, like, that's it. And it's like, yeah, I know it is. And so it's like teaching, you know, now when you do have those memories or you experience that feeling again, you can identify it and now you know what it is. And now you feel more empowered because you're like, I'm just fucking lonely and I'm having these memories. And like, okay.
Yeah. No, and it's true. Like, which I mean, I knew I was lonely, but like connecting, I guess I didn't connect the dots. And so just like having that connection, I was like, oh my God, like, girl, you're right, you know? It's helpful. And I think what you said is like, it is so empowering when we are able to understand our feelings, because it's like, you can't let someone else tell you how you're feeling because you are so in tune with your feelings that you're like, no, I don't feel that way. Like, you may be feeling that way and you're trying to project it onto me, but I don't feel that way. You know, but if you don't understand your feelings, I think it's a lot easier for someone to project their feelings onto you because you don't know what the heck you're feeling.
Or you start to adapt their definition of whatever it is, the emotion. Yeah, that must be right. And I tell my clients that all the time. I was like, when I talk about my feelings wheel, I do this little like spiel that I do. And I'm like, when we have our emotional vocabulary, then we can feel more empowered and we feel more in control of our response and our emotions and communicate that to other people. And that's literally what I tell like every single time I say that. And it all ties back to language, you know, the language that we use, the language we tell ourselves, the limits to our language, because we do have, you know, significant limits to the way that we speak, how we speak, the words that we know. And, you know, once we basically get out of school, we stop learning to a degree. about these new concepts and things unless you kind of do, you know, the independent work on your own, or you're, you know, learning these things through like social interactions, but you're not actually being taught by somebody else. Like, this is what the impact of this language means, or this is how you do this,
Mm-hmm.
how you do that. And so there's almost kind of this cap that we have on our language ability until something happens. And we have like these moments of like enlightenment of like, oh, like, yeah, that's, I'm lonely and that's what that means. Or yeah, this is the word that I've been looking for forever to describe how I'm feeling or to describe my identity. And that has so much power for me.
But I think most people wouldn't want to admit that they're lonely, you know? And so I think not only the language, but then, you know, allow yourself to feel it. It's okay to feel lonely. Like, I think me and you have talked on prior episodes, like, me and you on prior episodes have talked about how we humans are social creatures. Like, we need people, and it's okay to ask for help, or it's okay to say like, I need you, or whatever it is. But anyways, I think we could go on forever and ever about language and emotions and feelings. Girl, you know I can. But yeah, we just wanted to get on because I think it's really been something that me and you have been talking about a lot lately in our own personal life. And we both felt like, hey, you know, I'm sure if we're talking about this every other day, someone else might be interested in listening.
And I think we were talking about this until we knew what we were talking about, if that makes sense. Like, we've had these different interactions and we're like, yeah, like this happened or this happened. And then something just kind of like clicked for us. And it was like, oh, it's the power of language and like the words that we, how we speak to ourselves. And so I think even we had that journey of like, yeah, we've been talking about these different circumstances and instances. And then it was like, oh, that means language.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
I'm feeling full.
I'm feeling full. I feel like that was a very fast discussion.
Yeah, I think it went by fast.
So are you feeling full yet?
Are you?
Are you?
Are you?
If not, consider this. We want to know. Kittens and I and Karlie want to know.
Thank you for including me.
Kittens and Karlie and Kittens. Next podcast coming at you.
Karlie and Shamina.
We want to know what language means to you, or what are certain words that you've been able to reclaim that meaning or reclaim that power, and tell us. We want to have a conversation. We want to continue to have this conversation with all of you. So
hit us up in the DMs or comment
on Instagram, comment on Facebook, comment wherever we can see it.
YouTube.
I said that below.
Oh, I thought you said Facebook and Instagram.
I said YouTube first. So before we wrap up, we want to thank our wonderful patrons from Patreon, which are Therese Gallagher, Kevin Gallagher, and Joanne Stewart. Thank you all for your continued support, being our patrons. And if you are interested in wanting to support us in more of a financial way and getting bonus content, he jumped far. Did you see him jump?
I thought he fell.
Oh no. If you're interested in that, then check out our Patreon. It's on our Facebook page, on our Instagram page as well, and check it out.
Yeah. Or, you know, again, I'm going to say this every episode. I feel like even just liking our posts, sharing our posts, liking our YouTube video, whatever you are capable of doing, we would greatly appreciate that.
Absolutely. Thank you all for your continued support. And see ya. Same time, same place next week.
Yes. Thank you. Bye. Bye.